September 5th, 1971. The Azteca Stadium in Mexico City is filled with 112,000 people. All of them have come to watch the second unofficial Women's World Cup final. Host nation Mexico faces the Danish team, who already won the previous World Cup a year earlier, and they went on to win this one as well. Even though they were such a powerhouse in women's football at the time, the Danish Federation, the DBU, started an official women's national team only in 1972 and still wasn't really keen to promote women's football for many years to come. So the Scandinavians have struggled in recent years. Although the team led by superstar Pernille Harder came runners-up in the 2017 Euros, they failed to qualify for 3 World Cups in a row. After the success at the Euros, the team's negotiations about salaries and overall investment with the DBU took a hit. The players felt forced to go on strike and not play an important World Cup qualifying match against Sweden. This meant that the Danes failed to qualify for the 2019 World Cup, but their strike was at least kind of a success. A new agreement gave them, among other things, a 60% increase in salary if they qualified for a major tournament, which they did, for both the 2022 Euros and the 2023 World Cup. But not only are the glorious days for the national team kind of over, the domestic league, the Kvindeligaen, only has 8 teams and doesn't gravitate much media attention. Top talents leave early to go abroad to countries like England, Sweden, or even to play college football or soccer in the US. Of the 2023 World Cup squad, only 2 players played in Kvindeligaen. You're listening to the first episode of GloBall. I'm your host Verena from Women's Football Collective, and today, you might have guessed it, we're going to talk about women's football in Denmark.
GloBall, hosted by Verena. Because women's football matters.
With me to do that is Amalie Bremer. Amalie is a journalist. She hosts a show on Radio 4 and also has her own podcast. And she does it all. She's also the co-founder of a Danish women's national team fan club. Welcome to the show and thank you for taking the time.
Thank you very much.
So as we just heard, you're the co-founder of a fan club. How did that come about?
It came about in a way that as you said, I'm a radio host, and I was a host of a show called The Mission. And me and my colleagues were football fans, all of us, and we were kind of wondering why there was no fan initiative from the Danish FA. We knew there was a fan initiative surrounding the Danish men's national team, but there was nothing for the women's national team. So we were a bit, just like wondering how come that be. And then we just decided to make it ourselves. And I think as a women's football fan, I was missing a community where I could share stories about women's football, transfer rumors, articles, all kinds of stuff, and share this with other people with the same passion as me. So we basically just started the fan club as a Facebook group where everyone could participate and share whatever they felt like and have this community with other fans. And at the beginning there was like 50 members and we were super happy about that, and then 100, and now today there's more than 6,000 members of the group, and it's a really lively group with just a community that we were missing and that we really hope we could make. So that's, it's been a big joy for me. The Facebook group is one thing that's online, that's the community we've built there. But we've also done a lot of work at games and tried to develop the fan culture around the Danish women's national team. So my view has been that there needed to be a more active fan culture. So we made a special section in the stadium where we could have like drums and a megaphone and to start more chants and stuff like that. And also made travels like fan buses going around the country for games, and also and making like fan meetups when there was the Euros in England and so on. So it's online community and then also out in the real world.
Let's talk about the national team then. As you of course know, and some of the listeners back home might know as well, the Danish women's national team went on a strike not too long ago. Can you talk to me a bit about why the players felt the need to do that?
Yeah, I think get it into some kind of context. It's one of the big, very sad moments for Danish women's football, I think, because in 2017 the Danish women's national team really had a breakout year. They won silver at the Euros, were in the final at the Euros, and they really had a breakthrough. Pernille Harder was a big name, Nadia Nadim was a big name. Many people saw the games on TV. There was a big welcome when the team came back to Denmark at the town square in Copenhagen, our capital, and women's football were finally getting some traction in the Danish public. And then I think that was kind of a stepping stone for the players and for the team to say, like, okay, now everyone can see that we're working really hard. We're also getting results for Denmark. So we need to do better in regards of the things around the team. How the training is set up, how many people we have to accommodate us, and the economics around it, and so on. So that was kind of the platform from the Euros that they used to try and take this battle. And the problem was that it's pretty complicated, but they were kind of getting mixed up also in the battle that they were on the men's side. The problem was that the women had to pay the biggest price because they went on a strike, and that strike ultimately cost them the participation in the World Cup. So the women paid a much bigger price in this battle than the men did, and I think in some ways, when looking back at it now, the women ended up being a pawn in a game that were also designed for the men to get something that they wanted. I'm not sure that obviously not the men's players wanted it to be this way, but that's kind of how it ended up. And that was really unfortunate. So because that they didn't come and qualify for the World Cup then, the women's national team, there were such a long period after the success of the Euros in 2017 where the women didn't play any matches that mattered anything. So the big popularity and the traction that the women's national team had, it kind of died down in that period. So that was a really sad period, and all the good things that should have come from the Euros in 2017, they kind of lost it.
As you just highlighted, there were a lot of things that got lost for the national team back then. But when, for example, Pernille Harder talked about the strike, she said that overall it was still worth it. Can you talk to me a bit about the positives that came about?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that I'm a person. I'm a journalist. I'm someone looking from the outside, looking in. So that's my perspective, obviously. So when the players say that they got something from it, then that's something that you must respect, of course. But I think the price was really high, and I think that when you look at it now and how other countries developed, how they are dealing with women's football, I think Denmark is still behind. So it's not that there was a huge shift and then we can now say, okay, they paid a big price, but now Denmark is a front runner in this matter. I don't think so. That's my personal opinion. So in that perspective, I think they were brave to do so, and I think they put a lot on the line, and I think they also changed something. But there's still many issues in Danish women's football that needs to be dealt with. So yeah, in my opinion, the price was a bit too high for what they achieved, unfortunately.
What's the relationship between the DBU and the national team like now?
Yeah, I think if anyone remembers the old Facebook relationship statuses, I think this one would be, it's complicated. I think, as I said, it's better, but I also think that there is a lot to be done. And I'm probably also, and your listeners needs to know that I'm also probably a bit more critical of the Danish Federation, of the DBU. I think that they are behind in how they deal with women's football, as I said, and obviously the players know this. And women's football have been on the back burner in Denmark for a long time, and I think in general there are missing people in the DBU, in the Danish Federation, that are really there for women's football and who have the power and who have been getting the power to change this. So when you see, of course, I know England is a very big country, so it's hard to compare one to one. But when you see, I mean, they are hiring Kaskani to make a big commission and to make a big report and do actual things. We're changing this. We are giving more money. We have these specific goals for the Euros at home, and we need to do this and this, and we're hiring the best people and so on. This plan is not in place for Danish women's national team football, and that's what I'm missing when I'm looking for the outside. Then I feel like we need for the DBU to show the fans and the media and the players, obviously, that they really want to move forward, because a lot of other countries are moving forward fast. So that's a very big concern for Danish women's football, that we are kind of getting left behind.
Well, when you highlight that them not doing enough, I think that's a very good point. And I think when people hear that, our minds often immediately go to salaries and money. But I think we both know, and you definitely know, that it's about more than that. So what are these concrete things that they're not doing enough of?
Yeah, sure. I mean, regarding to salaries, I'm not the person to go out and say I think there should be equal pay at this moment in time, and that's definite, because I think actually that there are way more to be done before that. I think equal pay would be wonderful, but we have more basic steps to take before we come to that point, and I think that's also an opinion that a lot of the players share. But when it comes to the national team, I feel like equal pay is pretty normal these days. A lot of the countries that we compare ourselves with in Denmark have equal pay on the national team. And it's also a conversation happening in Denmark, also from the federation. So I know that they're working on it and seeing how can this be done. So that's not the biggest issue in my case. The biggest issue in my case is actually how, I mean, not to sound too, because I know that football is also feelings, but football is also business. And the Danish national team, the women and the men, they are products of the Danish federation, and they need to promote these products. They need to treat these products in a certain way, so that the customers, that's the fans and the media and so on, will buy it, in quotation, if you know what I mean. And I don't feel like they treat the product on the women's side the same as they treat the product on the men's side, and I think that is driving the Danish people to kind of thinking, okay, is this not a good product? And that is like an example is the stadium that the women play in. They've been playing at a small city in Jutland, a part of Denmark that is far away from our capital, where there obviously is the most people. And it's not to say that everything needs to be in the capital, but it makes sense that your national team is playing maybe in your national stadium, or at least in a stadium with a lot of people, a big stadium that's welcoming to this kind of product that you want to see as a very important and very good product of the Danish Federation. So when they play on a smaller stadium in a city where there is not a lot of people and not a lot of interest of women's football, I think that's one of the biggest signs that they are not prioritizing this product. And the Danish women's national team have played one time in our national stadium in Parken, where the men play all the time, and there was 21,000 people there, more than 21,000 people there. The stadium holds 36,000, but this was way beyond any record for Danish women's team game, and that's the only time they played in Parken. And that was the most wonderful day. I mean, I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it. And I just interviewed actually Rikke Sevike, who is until recently a women's national team player, and I asked her what was the biggest moment of your career, and she said the game in Parken, first thing. So that's just the way, I mean, how you present your product, how you present women's football from the Danish Federation. I don't think that they present it well enough for people to care.
Does that mean then that you think that if the DBU were to do more, people would kind of be interested, or do you think the interest in Denmark for women's football is more just there for big tournaments?
It's tough to say, because for many years, I mean, you're also kind of building a culture of interest, and for many years no one has been building this culture of interest. So that's also a reason why we made the fan club, because we were getting frustrated that no one was saying like, okay guys, it's super awesome to watch women's football. It's a fun experience. You can do it with your friends. You can do it with your family. You can eat popcorn or you can drink 1,000 beers and have a really good time. Whatever you want. I mean, all these things that we see in men's football, not to compare, but if you're interested in football and you feel like maybe men's football, there's a bit of maybe hooligans or there is some discrimination against LGBT people or maybe some racism sometimes, and say like, okay, we don't have this in women's football. So maybe this is something that you want as a football fan where you say, okay, maybe men's football is not for me, but this could be. And that was really a goal for us. And I think that was something that really came together with Game in Parken, because I spoke with a lot of people who were there, and a lot of people were at a football game for the first time. And they said they never imagined that a football game could have such a nice atmosphere, because they always see in the media, you know, or in the TV with maybe aggressive fans or whatever. And that was a big revelation for them that a football game could be like this. So I think there is a lot of interest and a lot of people are curious about women's football. And that's also something I think in our time that we're talking about equal rights and so on in Denmark anyways. And yeah, I think there is an interest, and I think a lot of people are curious, and we need to grab that moment in some way and get them into the games.
I think that's probably a pretty common experience. Like, it's for sure the one I've had with women's football, and a lot of listeners probably as well, and how it's so different. And of course, I mean, Denmark qualifying for the last World Cup probably helped a lot. How did you experience that World Cup?
I don't want to sound too negative, but there are a lot of, we are experiencing some poor choices and poor things when we have these big things. When I talked about the Euros in 2007, and then we had the big dive with the strike, and now we had the qualification for the World Cup. And usually the big tournaments would be on TV, on Danish national TV, where everyone can see it. But this time around it was a private streaming service that got the rights, and it's a pretty expensive service. So that was like a new barrier. And I feel like, and you probably also experienced this, as a women's football fan, you have to overcome a lot of barriers even to see the matches. Yeah, you have to find a lot of information. How can I see this? Blah, 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 in the stadium or in the TV. And there was another barrier where you had to buy a really expensive streaming service to watch the game. So that was a little bit of a downer. But all in all, I think it was amazing to be. I mean, it was the first time in almost 20 years that a Danish team were at the World Cup. So that was a big deal. And in the fan club, we had some streaming parties, viewing parties, in my local football club, and we were the room was just packed, and it was kids and it was grown-ups, and we had some partners there who were giving free beers to everyone, and there were free ice cream for the kids, and it was in the summertime, and there was a big yard with everyone there, and there were people even standing outside the big windows because the room was so packed. So that was kind of the big tournament vibe that you want when it's so far away that we couldn't go there. Obviously I wanted to be there in Australia, but yeah, so it was again sweet and sour, but obviously mostly sweet, because a Danish team at a World Cup and even qualifying to the knockout rounds, that was a big deal, I think.
Yeah, they for sure did pretty well in Australia. I think we can agree on that. But there might be a generational shift about to happen in Denmark. Where's the national team at right now?
Yeah, for sure. I think there is a generational shift. It's been starting now, the generational shift, for the last couple of, maybe half year, and it's still progressing. I don't think it's over, the generational shift, but it's underway. I think that the World Cup was the last tournament for our former coach, Lars Søndergaard, and he was under some criticism for playing maybe a little too boring. I don't know if you know this is probably a Danish thing, but Danish football fans are very critical, and they want, even though we are a very small country, Danish people always want to see our national team not only win, but also win in a beautiful way. So winning is not enough, even though we are a very small country.
I'm from Germany. I think we're kind of the same as well.
Yeah, but you're a very big country, so you have maybe more opportunities to have. I mean, you have so many more players and so on to take from. So yeah, I think that there was some criticism on how the team played, and even though we qualified from the group stage, it was not the most exciting football. If I'm being kind of, if I'm being honest, and also being sweet with them. But yeah, qualifying and then actually having a pretty tight game against Australia in the round of 16, which I think was exciting. And now we have a new coach, a Swedish guy called Andre Jeglerts, and he is known for more offensive football. He's known for having the ball at the players' feet more and getting more players on the final third of the field. So that's exciting, and that's something that we saw in the first part of the Nations League. We also beat Germany at home in Viborg. 2-0, so that was but then you beat us in Rostock, so we were we had the opportunity to go to the Final Four in the Nations League if we just had beat Iceland at home, and that was the big disappointment of this first period under Andre Jeglerts. So I think all in all he just started, so he's building something new. And that's exciting, and I think there's still a lot of talent on the Danish team. So the big question is of course, how will the future be? I mean, Pernille Harder is also stopping playing football at some point, and how are we gonna survive after that?
Okay, then let's talk about how you're gonna survive after that.
I don't want to think about it.
Okay, then we'll just pretend that Harder's gonna play forever, and but you'll have some other players then in the mix as well. Who do you think these players could be for the future of Denmark?
Yeah, obviously I think I have to mention firstly Katrine Kühl, who is owned by Arsenal but now on loan in Everton. She's a generational talent, I think, and many people also say that she's the biggest talent in Danish football after Pernille. Yeah, she's an incredible player, very technical, has a great vision of the game, a wonderful passer who can open up the field for her teammates in a very, very elegant way. So she's a wonderful player. I also think that a player like Josefine Hasbro is a player that will have a great future on the Danish national team. She plays now college football or university football. She studies at Harvard in the USA. So she's still young, but she just came pretty quickly into the national team and is already a fan favorite and a very good player for the team. She's very energetic. She also plays in midfield, but is more of a worker. She's tackling, she's running, really fighting. So she's also a great player. So those two in midfield is not a bad start.
I agree. But as you've just talked about, a lot of the young talent now plays abroad. So I also wanted to talk to you a bit about the Danish league, the Kvindeligaen. Can you tell me, or can you tell the listeners where the league's at right now?
I think Kvindeligaen needs a lot of development. Women's football have not been prioritized in Denmark, as I already spoke about, and a lot of the big teams on the men's side have not had women's teams. So Kvindeligaen has been kind of living their own life and not being as big as I for one wanted it to be. It also needed maybe a push on the financial side and so on. So at this moment it's not too prominent, and there's actually some discussion in Denmark at the moment about that you want, when national team players are kind of getting maybe a bit older and winding down in their career, you want a place like Denmark is a league where they could come home and have the last couple of years of their career in the Danish league, also to attract more attention, attract more fans, and so on. And Kvindeligaen at this moment is not in a place where the Danish national team players would come home and be. They would rather go to, for example, Sweden or Norway and so on. So that's a problem. And I know that they are working a lot to develop the national league in Denmark, Kvindeligaen. And also there is actually some progression at this moment, because a club like FC Copenhagen, a club like FC Midtjylland, that's one of the or two of the biggest teams on the men's side, they are actually getting women's teams now. Also Odense Boldklub. So that's 3 big cities with 3 big teams on the men's side that are now going into women's football. And that's going to be a big deal regarding the attention, and a lot of new fans hopefully coming in. So that's a big step forward, and I'm hoping that's going to develop the league a lot.
When I did my research, I also saw that they reduced the size of the league from 10 to 8, like more than 10 years ago. Do you think that with the new teams emerging and coming into the league potentially, they could move it up to 10 or even more again?
Yeah, I think so, definitely. And I think, in a way, making the league smaller is also just evidence that the level maybe wasn't there. And that's why they cut the league to 8 teams. And now when the top is broadening with the new teams coming and also more financial support from the existing teams, I think they will probably expand it again. That's already something that are in talks.
When men's clubs come into the women's game, of course, there's always this hope that they will bring money and resources, but there's also often this fear that they will take something away from the women's game. How do you view that?
I don't know if I see it as a bad thing. I think that women's football, I don't know is like in specifics what it's like in other countries, but I think in Denmark at the moment, women's football really needs these big players to attract more attention and attract more fans. So in a Danish context, I don't see it as a bad thing that these big clubs from the men's side are coming in. And when I look around just the landscape of women's football, I see only a few examples of pure women's clubs that are really doing well. America is something else, but in European context, I think most of the teams that are doing well are also teams with strong men's sides, and I really don't see too much negativity in that. I think that's natural, and as long as they're doing it right, I think that's the most important thing. Then I don't really care if they have a men's team or not. I mean, in Denmark we have Fortuna Hjørring, who was traditionally a very, very big team on the women's side, and they're having that's a traditional women's or girls club, but besides that it's all teams that have also men's teams.
And of course, with men's teams, there come academies as well. I mean, we've already talked about Pernille Harder a bit. She trained in a boys' academy. What does that look like for young girls in Denmark today? Do they train in boys' academies? Are there any girls' academies now?
Yeah, I mean, only a few years back there was almost only Fortuna Hjørring, as I just mentioned, really going into to girls' academies and so on. But more have come. And now I want to mention a club like FC Nordsjælland, a club that has a pretty special set of values. They are a part of the Right to Dream concern and have also academies in Africa and now also started in American soccer. They are doing things equally on the men's and the women's side academy-wise. I'm not sure about the financial part, but they have the same opportunities. They have the same gyms, they play on the same pitch and so on. So FC Nordsjælland is a team or club that also gave more opportunities to girls, and that's also actually the club where Katrine Kyhl was brought up in the academy. So they already had a big talent to show for it. And I know it's a big point where the new clubs like FC Copenhagen and FC Midtjylland are also aware that they need to focus on academies, because then otherwise they won't have any players in 15 years.
And of course, if they don't do that, they might even go abroad sooner than they already do. Do you think that these new clubs coming in or the investing more into the women's game could also help the national team then? How does the national team kind of play into that?
Yeah, I think, I'm not sure about the English word, but it's just very important to have this supply chain in some way from the bottom and from the youngsters and to the national team. And at this moment, I'm maybe a bit concerned that there are some holes in the supply chain for Danish women's football. So that's why it's super, super important to get the Kvindeligaen up and running, the Danish league, and because that is a big step in the supply chain. And it's also just that if Kvindeligaen is not strong, then there won't be fans, there won't be interest, there won't be media, and that's also a big part of growing women's football at this point in Denmark, I think. So having a strong domestic league is really key in this moment, and I know that they're working on it, and I know that it's progressing now with the new team, so that's positive. I don't know if I've been if I've been too negative. I'm looking also at a brighter future, so that's good. But obviously it's super important to have. I think Denmark is a small country, so we will never have one of the strongest leagues in the world, but we need to have a league, in my opinion, and that's also the same on the men's side, where we can develop some really good talent that can be sold out of the league. Then that will give financial stability to the league, but it's also a league where the level is as high that prominent players, maybe, as I said, in the last part of their career, will come back and play, and the financial is there, so they can have also a good wage and so on when they come back. So that's the place actually where I want to see the Danish league in the coming years.
I'll give you a chance to be positive then. What gives you hope for Danish women's football and its future?
Yeah, my hope for the future is these clubs coming in at this moment. I think it's a very exciting moment in Danish women's football because it's clubs that have a big fan base. It's clubs that attract a lot of people, a lot of media, a lot of all these things that women's football in Denmark have been missing. My opinion is that it seems like, and I don't know this now because we're still missing the end product at this moment in time. But from what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing and how I'm also personally involved in some of these projects, is that these projects are also focused on the right things. They're also focused on the youngsters. They're focused on getting more girls to play football, and the girls that want to play it on a higher level, that they have the opportunity to do so. So that's really positive. And I think just, looking ahead a few years and maybe seeing we have one big derby in Denmark, that's Brøndby and FC Copenhagen on the men's side. And now FC Copenhagen finally is getting the women's team. So looking ahead in a few years maybe to see a women's derby in a full stadium somewhere in Denmark, that would be super awesome. I'm really looking forward to that.
So as we come to an end of this episode, lastly, I wanted to ask you 2 questions, which we plan on asking every guest, but you're the first one, so you have the honor. And the first one is, what attracted you to women's football? I mean, you've kind of already touched on it, but maybe you can say again, like, what got you invested in women's football?
I played myself actually as a kid for many, many years. And I used my entire childhood playing football, also on a pretty high level. But then I was one of those kids that maybe wanted to also go to parties in high school and start drinking beer and so on. And my football friends were maybe more serious than I was. So I kind of drifted out of it. But football has been a part of my life the whole time. And as an adult, I think what attracted me to women's football was also the representation part. I think it's wonderful to watch very, very good, strong, cool women do something that they're really good at. I just had a daughter recently, and I think it's important that she also have role models, even though it's not in football, but just anywhere in life. And I think that women's football in these years is a very, very wonderful space in football. I'm also a men's football fan, but men's football can also, I don't know if other people feel this way, but in my opinion, it can also maybe push you away a little bit. Prices are going up. There are these things that I mentioned, hooliganism, racism, discrimination, sports washing, and so on. And I think women's football is maybe a little safe haven, even though it might change fast. But at this moment in time, it's maybe a little safe haven. And to me, that's just what football needs to be. A nice space where you can have fun, also play football. I still play football, but now in a very low level. But yeah, it's just a nice space for me to be in. I think it's women's football give me that.
Okay, thanks for just giving me the perfect way to transition to the second question. How do you think this safe haven that you spoke about can be kept? How can women's football remain that what's so unique and so good about it?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I'm really spending a lot of time thinking about that actually, because that's something that's so important to me. I think it's gonna be difficult because football in these years are commercial. It's about business, and FIFA and UEFA, they want to develop women's football, and that's a good thing, but they want to develop it to make more money. I'm not trying to be naive about that. I know that's the reason behind everything. So I think that's going to be difficult. And we saw it now with the World Cup, and that Visit Saudi wanted to be a sponsor. And a lot of the teams said, no, we don't want that, because women's rights in Saudi Arabia is not okay at this moment. So they're not going to use our tournament to show their commercials. And that's a good example, I think, on how different sides of this matter is kind of struggling at this moment. But I think it's just so important for women's football to try and hold on to the values of women's football, and I think the players is a big key here, and the fans as well, because I'm also aware that the players have a lot of other things to do. They're also professional football players, and they're also role models, and also sometimes politicians and stuff like that. But I think if fans and players are trying to hold on to these values, that's going to go a long way.
GloBall, hosted by Verena. Because women's football matters.
So this was it. This was my chat with Amalie Bremer, who's very involved in Danish women's football in many ways, as you just learned. Finally, we wanted to give you one question to answer wherever you listen to this podcast. And as Amalie already gave you a few options for this, but the question is, who are you most looking forward to in the future for the Danish women's national team? You can, of course, use her options or think of somebody else. Feel free to comment. We will be back on March 10th with another episode and another country. This was GloBall. I'm Verena, and I hope you enjoyed.
Women's football matters.